Okay, welcome to geometry. Um, One thing that you're going to want to know as we start chapter 1 here is that, as it says at the top of these notes, there's a lot of different terms that you're going to learn in chapter 1, and the faster that you can learn those, the better. So if you want to go to my website on the chapter 1 page and at some point start practicing those vocabulary flashcards that we put on there, if you find that you're having trouble remembering all the terms, that might help you. So we'll jump right in here, and what we're starting off chapter 1 with is these things called undefined terms. And you've heard these before, or at least a couple of them, in algebra. It's point, line, and plane. The reason why we call them undefined terms is because even though we can talk about them and discuss how we're going to use them and what they mean to us in math, there's not really a way that we can give you an exact example in real life. So when you take a piece of chalk and draw what people say is a straight line on the sidewalk, for example, and then someone will say, oh, well, don't step over the line or whatever. Well, it's not really a line. It's a line segment. You should know from algebra, a line, when you draw it, remember, on the coordinate plane, and you put arrows on the end of it, a line goes off forever in two directions. So there's no way that we can give you an example or create an actual line in real life because you can't sit there and keep drawing it forever and ever and ever. So we draw a line segment and put two arrows on the end of it and say this is a line, it goes on forever. So we're going to do things like that in geometry where even though we can't give you an exact example in real life, we can give you something that kind of represents it. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is points, and you've seen that before on a coordinate plane. It's just a dot. Well, we're going to have a lot of those in geometry, so we're going to name them with a capital, regular, non-cursive letter. So if I put an A next to that point, it's called point A. So I'm either going to talk about it like this, or I'll call it point A, or just A, the capital letter. It's a capital letter. So if I were to do this, that's not correct. Now what do I need to know about a point? There's no size and no dimension. So again, what that means is you can't really make a point in real life. This point here actually has some length. I could take out a ruler and measure it. Even though it's very small, it's measurable. That means that it's not an actual point. We're just using this dot to represent what a point is. But a point actually can't be measured. We just use it in relation to others. So where two lines cross, for example. A line you have used before in algebra looks like that, but right now it's just a segment. We have to say that it goes on forever in both directions, so we put arrows on the end of it, right? Now, I could put points on the line. In fact, there are an infinite number of points on this line, but I'm just going to label two of them. This is point A and this is point B. Okay? We sometimes use just one letter to name a line, and that is a lowercase cursive. So I'm going to go like this, lowercase cursive L. So how am I going to name this name? Well, what you do is you put any 2 points on the line. Well, the only 2 points we have labeled are A and B, so I'm going to use A and B. And you put this symbol above it. So if I see this, I'm going to call that line AB. It's 2 capital letters from the points with a line symbol. And the line symbol has the 2 arrows on the end. This is one way we can name a line. Or we could just use one lowercase cursive letter. It's important that if you're using the cursive, you make it lowercase. You'll see why in a little bit. So this line here, I could call it line AB, or I could call it line L. We'll talk a little bit later about also how the order of the points doesn't matter. So I could also call this line BA, and I would use this symbol above it. So, what do we need to know about a line? Well, you've done this in algebra. It goes forever in both directions. So it has one dimension, which is length. Now, what is the length of the line? Well, it goes on forever. But we could take parts of the line and measure it. So if I said, what's the length of line segment A to B, we could measure just this distance and get an actual finite measurement, right? Okay. Finally, if you recall in algebra, you guys drew lines and points on something called the coordinate plane, which was what you saw was a big flat surface, and then you would draw the y and x axes on it, right? Well, we're going to use planes like that, but we're not always just using the coordinate plane. We're using many planes. A plane is a two-dimensional surface, a flat surface that goes on forever in all of those directions, and we usually draw it. We draw it kind of like a parallelogram, but it doesn't have an ending like a parallelogram. So if we're going to call a line, picture a string of dental floss that you could stretch and it goes forever and ever and ever in those two directions. A plane would be like if you took a piece of paper and the paper just stretched out in all directions forever. So what we do is, just like there's two ways to name a line, there's two ways to name a plane. First of all, a plane has many, many, many points on it. But for this example, I'm just going to put 3 labeled points on it. Notice how this capital cursive R does not have a point next to it. So there's no point R in this diagram. There's a point A, a point B, and a point C. This plane is a flat surface that goes on forever in all directions. Okay. So how can I name this particular plane? Well, I could just call it with the word plane, plane ABC. Just like a line, you use any 2 points that are on it. A plane, you pick any 3 points that are on it. And again, the order doesn't matter. So I could call it plane ABC, plane BAC, plane CBA. You use the word plane and 3 capital letters. Remember, it's capital regular, non-cursive letters, because a capital letter is a point, and we're naming this plane by 3 of its points. Or you could just name it with 1 capital cursive letter. In this case, like we would just call it plane R. So you could just use capital cursive letter. This saves us time when we have like a big diagram that has a bunch of planes, points on it. It's a little bit easier to just say plane R or line L than to have to keep using a bunch of letters. Okay? Okay, so why don't you go ahead and pause this for a second and try a couple of these out on your own. I want you to just draw and label point H for number 1. Draw and label line K, etc. So go ahead, take a minute, pause the video, and then when you unpause it, I'll put them on Okay, so here are the answers. Hopefully you're able to get most of these right. Number 1, draw and label point H. You just put a dot for the point, and then this is a capital non-cursive letter. This is point H. For number 2, draw and label line K. Don't forget you must put arrows on it to make it a line. And since we're using just the lowercase letter K to name this line, do not put a point here by this, because this is not a point. This is just a letter naming the line itself. Just like for number 3, we're not using any points to label plane G. We're just calling it plane G. So you just draw the flat surface, put the big capital cursive letter G on it. Okay. For label, draw and label VF. Draw your line. You're going to put 2 points on there. VF. They don't always have to go in order. So if you had these switched, if you had this was F and this was V, that'd be fine. And finally, for number 5, draw and label plane JET. Just put the capital non-cursive letters on there and a point next to it. So that's the start of 1-1 of notes. We're going to finish this up tomorrow. And again, you could always come back and look at any of these videos over again. I encourage that, especially at the beginning, to make sure you get the notation down and how we draw and label these, because that's something where once you get that, it's going to help a lot of the rest of the things in Chapter 1. So good job so far, and we'll see you in the next video.